And welcome back to the Hot Lap. Big apologies. We completely missed the race review because I became a bit ill. Chest infection. Couldn't talk. Need air. I got enough air, but probably not enough to talk. I'm not quite 100%. Apologies for my voice. But can't hold this any longer. There's loads of news to go for. But let's have a quick look at those race finishes. By now, I'm sure everyone will have your opinions on the race. Probably up to date with the news of the race. In last place, well, did not start, let's say, was Yuki Tsunoda. But before we get to Yuki, let me say what an exciting Grand Prix we had for 2023. One of, I think, we, including in the Netherlands, like Zandvoort, we've probably had two of the more interesting races of the season. Now, put them in any other season, maybe not, but for this season, not bad. And for Monza, a fairly exciting race. And we even had, for the first 10-15 laps, an actual race for the lead. And it wasn't bad. Yes, the Max Verstappen chuff train keeps on going, looking like it's never going to stop. But at least, Carlos Sainz, I tell you what, if he ever needed to pull out an exciting race, and a race where he showed the team bosses, his Ferrari team, who is boss, at least at Monza, and why they want to keep him for the next few years. More of the same, Carlos Sainz. Well done. We'll get into that in a bit. So as we said, last, Yuki Tsunoda. Second to last, Esteban Ocon. I mean, you hardly knew Alpine were actually in the race, really, if I'm honest. They didn't really turn up at all. Poor Tsunoda went out on the parade lap. Two Hasses, 17th and 18th, despite having Ferrari powertrains. A bit anonymous as well. They were the only team that was lapped. Lance Stroll 16th. What has happened? What, pray tell, has happened to Aston Martin? Pierre Gasly, the other Alpine, 15th. Zhou in the best liveried car of the weekend, along with Bottas. Logan Sargent 13th in a Williams, which I think probably his best chance of a top 10. That and the Netherlands, the last two races. I keep telling you, James Vowles is their question marks, big question marks. They're going up about what they're going to do with Sargent next year. Piastri 12th, but he's only 12th because of that clash with Lewis Hamilton. We'll get into that when we talk about Lewis. But once again, a fairly solid weekend for Piastri. And one where he was comfortably ahead of Lando Norris. Yes, Lando, he may have been a bit faster. However, I don't think he was that much faster, and McLaren definitely gave Lando a favourable strategy. Liam Lawson, wow, I mean, one of the men of the race, in 11th, his first full weekend. I think, given the current evidence, given where he's coming from, as in a rookie in his first year, at this time, when you look at Daniel Ricciardo's first two races, bear in mind his experience, Liam Lawson's first two races, Daniel Ricciardo, Liam Lawson's, I think, is more impressive of the two. Bottas getting the best livery car, a point in 10th. Well done, Valtteri Bottas. Nice. But not so well done, but it might not be his fault. Fernando Alonso in 9th. A kind of an anonymous race for Aston Martin. I think he's definitely got questions, hasn't he, for Aston Martin. Lando Norris in 8th. I think that's the best McLaren probably we're going to do. 8th and 9th had Piastri finished. Disappointing, yes. Well, let's see how they go in Singapore and Japan. Because they're two, once again, very different circuits, aren't they? If they can go well there, it's going to be interesting for the rest of the season. Williams, Alex Albon, possibly not, out of position maybe for the race. What a qualifying, though. What a defence against Lando Norris. No, he couldn't beat Hamilton. He couldn't keep Hamilton behind. But what a defence. Well done, Alex Albon. Absolutely fantastic. One of the man of the race so far. This guy in a car that should have, a lot of people don't think is that fast. Yes, it has been very fast in Monza. They came out of nowhere at the Netherlands. But Alex Albon, again, well done. Lewis Hamilton, I think he'll be really disappointed with himself about causing that Oscar Piastri crash. Nearly sending both of them, let's be honest, out of that race. Lucky not to both be out. And fair play to Mr. Hamilton. After the race, he put his hands up and said, yep, that's my fault. And apologised to Oscar Piastri. 100% pure class from Lewis. His comeback, I think, where he qualified, was really, really solid. George Russell, solid job as well. Both Mercedes drivers are getting 5-second penalties. Bit weird, really, isn't it? If I'm honest, for both Mercedes drivers to get those 5 seconds, but also deserved. I mean, George Russell was basically like, yeah, screw the chicane when he was coming up, I think, against Ocon at the time. But there we go. Chicanes are nothing for George Russell. Charles Leclerc, solid weekend. Not as fast as Carlos Sainz, but you felt the minute practice started, Carlos Sainz seemed to have just that step over Leclerc. And you thought maybe the race Leclerc would get him. Towards the end, he was faster. But is that because Sainz had used all his tyres up, fighting both Perez and Verstappen? Perez, qualified? No, it's not qualifying. Perez finishing the race in second place, where he should be finishing in what is the fastest car. But I think he did a solid job. And we need more of that, really, don't we, from Sergio Perez? Let's see how he goes in Singapore. King of the streets. As the street tracks, there's a lot of people, that's what they say Perez is. We will see in Singapore. Will he have his mojo back? Once again, Max Verstappen in first. Did good to get past Carlos Sainz, but you felt it was only a matter of time. Man of the race, though. Carlos Sainz, without a shadow of a doubt, with special mentions to Albon and Liam Lawson. And team of the race, you've got to give it to Ferrari. They tried everything to win that race. They couldn't, but they threw everything at it, and they allowed both their drivers to race. Now, with the Red Bull team also, it came out after the race that Max Verstappen did have a bit of a problem, which is why Perez ended up catching him quite a lot. So, Monza. Yep, this is a story from Planet F1.com. Monza data reveals how Ferrari took the fight to Red Bull. Excuse me. Still got the snivels. Now, Ferrari provided an exciting race, it said, as we know. And Ferrari, however, it goes on to say that Ferrari, quite rightly, they've been really disappointing over this season. But they showed us that they'd never give up. And their progress has been quite visible, especially this weekend in qualifying. Pole position, obviously, for Carlos Sainz. And it requires, as we know, Mons, a different aerodynamic setup compared to other tracks. We've got those long and fast straights. And they're on the throttle for 80% of the track, which is the highest amongst, I think, all the tracks, it says. And the article goes on to say you can increase top speed in various ways, but the most effective one is by adjusting the car's aerodynamics. The main goal is obviously to reduce that drag. And like the rest of the teams, Ferrari brought new front and rear wings for the home race. The angle at which there is much smaller and significantly contributes to reducing that drag. There's an example of their wings there. Unfortunately, I think without seeing the other front wings that they would have, it's quite hard to see the difference. In the picture above, though, it says you can see the new designed front wing with a completely different upper flap, and the front wing goes an important part, as we know. They also put a new power unit as well, and they did. I mean, this is the chart. Skinny lower plane dragsters. I mean, this is the chart for the race, and there we go. That's just for qualifying. Ferrari and Alfa reached 350 kilometers an hour. Still, under DRS, their wing was non-existent. Still, they managed to keep balance, just 4 kilometers off the dragster SF19. And that was obviously, you had Williams there, you had Red Bull, and then George Russell with 341. Wow. I mean, yeah. There we go. And in the graph above, you can see the maximum speeds of each team during qualifying in their fastest laps. After all the changes discussed, it's not surprising, as we know, that Ferrari had their maximum speed. It's also worth noting that, like some teams on the grid, they designed their car with a focus of reducing that drag. And for the same reason, it's not surprising that Williams and Alfa Romeo are also faster on the straights than Red Bull. It says if we return to the graph, we can see Red Bull is nowhere near Ferrari, as we saw that, in terms of maximum speed. The reason for this is that Red Bull used an improvised low downforce wing. As you can see, there's Red Bull all the way there. Excuse me, on 343. So, there we go. The straights dominated by Ferrari, but Red Bulls were the fastest in the corners. And because I think Red Bull have a better downforce car. They looked after their tyres more. And if you remember, when Max Verstappen passed Carlos Sainz, it was only after he locked his tyres up. And here on Race Fans, Sainz started to believe he could win the Italian Grand Prix. Yeah, Sainz, in brief, Sainz, it says, like we've been saying, used tyres too much in defence against Verstappen. Came under pressure early. He kept his rival at bay for about a quarter of the race before the Red Bull driver eventually found a way past. And before that, Sainz admitted he started to think he could win. He said, I felt like I had it fairly under control, but then I think around lap 10 to 12 I started feeling the rear tyre giving up a lot earlier than I would have expected. He said, at that point I realised I'd used my tyres too much, probably to keep Max behind. I'd worn left rear tyre too much, and that I was going to suffer for the rest of the race, because I was probably going to make me box early onto a hard tyre, and then that second stint was going to be long. It's exactly what happened. My feeling was correct. Honestly, I didn't expect it to grade so much, but it was clear that I was pushing very, very hard to keep him behind. Probably harder than I should have done, but well done, Carlos Sainz. We applaud you. Easily man of the race and team of the race. What was not team of the race, potentially, maybe, according to the team boss, was McLaren with their unacceptable Italian Grand Prix clash on that first corner. So, Andrea Stella declared that the Turn 1 clash between Piastri and Norris was not acceptable. That was basically when, I think it was, Piastri, when he was coming out the pits, they pitted Norris first, and Norris just got ahead. Now, the McLaren drivers have been relatively close to pace, it says, for much of the season. This is on WTF1.com. And their choice to pit Lando first, despite Oscar being ahead on track, had already frustrated fans on social media, as Oscar fought to come back out ahead of his teammate. The front right of Piastri's car hit Norris' slide pod. Luckily, there was no major damage for either. That's where they are there. They did come very close. That didn't save the pair from Stella's wrath. Talking to the media, he said, there should never ever be a contact between two McLaren cars. There was contact, which doesn't fit the way we go racing at McLaren. Stern words from the McLaren boss. And when asked if he'd speak to both drivers, he replied, "You just review things like you do with anything that is technical operating. What is important is to have a clear perimeter as to what you deem as acceptable and what you deem not acceptable." It's an emotional thing. It's like you did with the other things. You deal with racing in a similar way. So, not happy with McLaren there. I mean, that's kind of the main stories coming out of the race. We had obviously the shade from Toto Wolff calling Max Verstappen's record-breaking 10 wins in a row. Well done, Max. Wikipedia stat. I think it's an important stat. And excuse me, at the beginning of the beginning of the race weekend, Lewis saying Max has not had as good teammates as him, which is he saying that? I mean, yes, I do believe. I mean, Hamilton has gone up against what is now 3 champions. So absolutely yes. I think that's a fact. I think you cannot argue that Hamilton has had better teammates than Max. I don't know why he's throwing the shade maybe now. It kind of looks like sour grapes. But having said that, I think both Toto and Hamilton, when they lost the 2021 season on a last-minute safety car that should not have happened, it was against the rules, and Max Verstappen passed you on the last lap when Lewis should be an 8-time champion, really. And then you hear that Red Bull breached the budget cap by potentially up to 2 million in the 2021 season. I think you're allowed to be a bit sour, but I guess it's how you present yourselves. And I think here they've come out. I think even Martin Brundle has kind of like commented on them looking a bit sour as well, and a bit like we kind of expected more from Toto Wolff. But this is sport. This is emotion. We've heard Max and Horner say equally and sometimes worse things than that. We've seen Max do worse things on the track in the heat of the moment, I think, than that as well. So it's sport. It does happen. People do say silly things. Let's move on. So, and moving on we shall. Talking about budget cap, the FIA has confirmed no Formula 1 budget cap breaches for 2022. The FIA, they found no breaches. Fantastic. I mean, as we know, last year Red Bull out breached, then Aston Martin were punished for, I think, procedural breaches. But it was only Red Bull that ended up breaching that. Yeah, they were fined £6 million for £1.86 in 2021 overspent. One Aston Martin were fined £388,000 for a procedural breach. But despite murmurings in the paddock that some teams might have breached the cost cap, the FIA confirmed on Tuesday that no team was found in breach. So that's really good for Formula One. We can now move on and hopefully have an interesting Singapore Grand Prix. Hopefully have a really interesting end of the season. Failing that, we look to 2024 and pray that someone brings a fight to Red Bull. If they can't now, they do it sooner rather than later. Who's most likely to beat Red Bull? Well, I think it's really either going to be one of three teams, probably not Aston Martin now. Really, it's going to be either Mercedes or Ferrari or McLaren, I think, in that order. But stay tuned. This has been the Hot Lap. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you next time.